my research into these lost spirits, that's what a mojo is, started about 5 years ago. I was in the north of England in Stourbridge, and I was giving a talk, and, normally what happens is after a talk, quite a lot of people come down to the front of the stage, and a lot of the time people bring things, and it's very nice of them, and they bring me photographs, and they bring me audio recordings and other pieces of evidence, and I've managed to collate a big library of material from different people. And this chap came up to me, and he had a large envelope. These photos that he had in the envelope were bigger than 8 by 10. They were really big. And he said to me, he said, "Do you want to see a photograph of a spirit?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I'm very interested in this type of thing." So he pulled out the first photograph, and I thought, well, this guy's paid a lot of money to have these huge photographs printed, and I thought, this is going to be something special. And the first photograph is just of a door. You see, it's a closed door, just with a blank wall. And he said to me, "Can you see the spirit?" And I said, "Oh, no, I can't see the spirit in that photo. It's just a door." And he said to me, you look closer. And I did look closer, and he pointed to what looked like a crack, a black crack between the wooden surround of the door and the plaster on the wall, and it was at the top of the door frame. So then he got the second photograph out, and that was like a side-on, sort of pretty close-up view of this black crack. Now, it just looked like a crack, okay? And he said to me, "This is a lost spirit. And it's in this room, and they hear murmurings, and they hear talking." And this alerted this guy, and he staked out the room, and he realized that the spirit was dormant, and it was taking on the shape of this thing that looked like a black crack above the door. So I thought, well, that sounds really strange. I'd never heard of anything like this before. And then he showed me the third photograph, and you could clearly see then that, yes, it did look like a crack for most of its length, and then you could see that part of this blackness was sort of overlapping the edge of the actual door frame as if it was drooping slightly. And he said to me, that is a rare photograph. He said, "I call these mojos." And he goes, "They're everywhere." And then he showed me another photograph, and you could see that this thing had moved, and it sort of moved along the top edge of the wooden frame of the door, and part of it wasn't sort of in contact with the wall anymore. And you could actually see the join between the piece of wood that made up the top of the surround of the door frame and the wall. And I said to him, I'd never come across this kind of thing before, and is it still there? And he said, yes, it's still there, but he tries not to pass underneath the door. And I said to him, why? What would happen? And he said that these lost spirits hang around on the tops of door frames, waiting for somebody to walk through. Because what they want is somebody who's under a lot of kind of stress, or somebody who's under the influence of alcohol, somebody who's under the influence of drugs, to walk through, and then this mojo would actually drop from the door frame, and it'd go head first and enter that person's aura or their astral body through what he said was their crown chakra. So I wish I'd taken copies of these photographs, because I realised after I started researching the existence of these lost spirits, these mojos, whatever you want to call them, that photographs like this are extremely rare. And if this gentleman sees this film, I'd like him to send me copies of those photos. Now, what is a mojo? Where on earth do these things come from? Well, you know the song Eleanor Rigby? All those lonely people. Where do they all come from? Over the years that I've dedicated into researching the spirit world, I've realized that many people die lonely. And they die lonely mainly because they've built barriers, built walls between themselves and other people through bigotry, arrogance. They've lived out of their lower self. Now, what's the difference between the lower self and the higher self? Well, the higher self would be a person who tries always to think of the effect that they're having on other people, and try and be compassionate and polite, and to try and be good as much as possible, and to try and live in harmony with nature, and always to be mindful of causing any kind of tension or stress with other people, trying to avoid that. And that would be somebody who's trying to live out their higher self. Unfortunately, millions, if not billions of people die, and they've lived their lives in their lower self. They have not bothered to read, they've not bothered to research anything about the death experience, even though they must have known that death was inevitable. And these people have died lonely, and they have not fulfilled the dreams that they might have had when they were children. And therefore, their spirit finds it extremely difficult to separate from their physical body, but nonetheless they do separate. And because they really shielded themselves from any kind of spiritual thought, they just allowed themselves to be force-fed by television, and television doesn't have really any serious spiritual information on it whatsoever. The spirits of these people hang around because they think, well, the game is not yet over. The spirit is free of the physical body, which in most cases would have been in pretty bad health. And so they discover this new form of freedom as a spirit. However, they realize that they're imprisoned in some way because they have no idea of how to move on, go to a higher spiritual plane. And so what they do is they take up residence in places which don't have too much movement of people. They prefer dusty, unclean rooms, and like this man said, they take up residence on door frames. And this is a very common thing, and you'll find that there are millions, if not billions, of lost mojo spirits, whatever you want to call them, in every city around the world. The Freemasons and the Templars, who designed and built the great medieval cathedrals, and also all of the architects and designers of all of the churches, must have been fully aware that mojos liked to take up residence on the flat part of a door frame, because nearly every single church and cathedral in the world has windows and doors which are shaped like that. And the reason that they're shaped like that is so that the mojo just sort of slides off and cannot actually get a grip on a doorway which is shaped like that. Now, in some cultures, these mojo spirits are called sliverers or slivering. Now, where have we heard slithering before? Well, we see it in Harry Potter. The SBR's membership included many leading scientists of the day, who spent fortunes studying people who had psychic abilities. These psychic people claimed they could bridge the gap between the living physical world and the spirit world, and as such were called mediums. Mediums sometimes allowed their bodies to be entirely possessed, albeit temporarily, by spirits who would then speak through the medium. On rare occasions, physical manifestations of an eerie white substance called ectoplasm was seen emerging from the body of the medium and forming the shape of hands, faces, and, in particularly rare cases, the entire body of a deceased person's spirit. During the 1860s, scientific investigation of these so-called mediums involved the eminent scientist Sir William Crookes, the man who had seen the faces of spirits appear in the dark mirror during rituals at the Golden Dawn, and who had first demonstrated publicly that images could be created electronically using the cathode ray tube. In France, a huge modern spiritualist movement began in the 19th century with the birth of Léon Denisard Réveil, who was born in Lyon in 1804. Réveil was at first skeptical of the reports of French explorers who had witnessed shamans in Siberia and Canada drumming up the spirits of their ancestors. In 1855, a friend invited Réveil to a séance where spirits made themselves manifest in front of the sitters. The table also levitated and turned. Réveil underwent an evangelical conversion to spiritualism. Réveil was instructed by the spirits to change his name. He became known as Allan Kardec. His experiences and conversations were written down in a book called The Book of Spirits. Allan Kardec claimed that there were two independent worlds, one visible and the other invisible. Kardec said that the spiritual life force is formed of quintessential matter, which is united to the physical body by a so-called astral body. Kardec taught reincarnation as a matter of fact. he told all his followers that there is no death. In fact, according to Allan Kardec, there are no dead people. Everyone who has died discovers the reality of the spirit world. Allan Kardec also taught the law of karma as a matter of fact. That is, if you lead your life doing bad things, being lazy or self-centered, or leading an indulgent, non-spiritual life, then your spirit will suffer the consequences after the death of your physical body. Allan Kardec also taught that just before the time of the death of the physical body, each person is replayed a movie of all the things that they have seen and done in their previous life. Well, to be absolutely honest, I don't think it's a very rare thing to be walking around with these mojos inside us. I see, most people at one time or another, acting outside their personality. And the thing about a mojo is that it's desperate to re-experience the physical body. I mean, mojos want to cling on to the physical plane, and the reason they want to stay here is because they want to experience strong emotions, they want to experience sex, they want to experience any kind of strong emotion to give them, if you like, some kind of sustenance and some kind of form of entertainment. There is nothing else for them to do. Most of us are of a good disposition, and it's very difficult for these things to actually get a grip on us. However, there is an interesting photograph from Australia of these two childlike hands gripping onto a man while he's getting drunk. He's having a good old drink. And alcohol, many psychics have told me, is one of these drugs which really, really oils the wheels, if you like, and allows people to drop down into their lower self, and they find themselves, pub crawling in these dirty old watering holes, bad bars and this kind of thing. And in cities, there's an infestation of these lost souls. And it's when somebody is inebriated that you can often get a really bad situation where not only one, but maybe two, maybe three of these mojos have dropped to their way into the person's chakra system, whatever you want to call it. What unfolds then is sometimes a pretty serious story. It can get to the point where we have multiple personalities within one person, and you can have a situation where the mojos are competing for, the person's waking hours, and the mojos can speak directly to that person, and people can, start to think that they're going mad. If we then look at very extreme cases where a mojo has maybe been resident in somebody for 20 or 30 years, that mojo takes the path of least resistance in terms of its manipulation of physical matter. Ideally, that mojo wants its own body again. It's a lost spirit. It did have a body at one time, and its main goal is it wants to have another body. And what can happen is that small organisms in the body, and the smallest organisms that we find in the human body are viruses and bacteria. You can have a situation where these bacterial cells in the gut are manipulated, and shamans in South America who do what is known as psychic surgery claim to be able to cut out of people's abdomens these worm-like structures, and these are objects that have been sort of knitted or woven together using bile, detritus, bacteria and plaque in the digestive system. These shaman doctors, they say that these worm-like structures, which have been photographed on a few occasions, are the result of the mojo working inside somebody's body to try and create a physical body for the mojo to live in.